All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show. You one-stop shop for all things Commanders. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so that you never miss an episode like today's episode with Mike Jones from the Athletic. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Let's see. National reporter. What is the biggest? I mean, aside from the obvious, what's kind of the biggest difference between being a beat recorder, covering one team, and then jumping to like the national market where you're in charge of like keeping up with all the teams?
I think the biggest thing is just comfort and familiarity. When you are at a facility every single day, seeing those guys every single day, you're in the locker room, you're getting them off the field, you're seeing coaches, you're talking to coaches, you know everybody pretty much knows you because they see you all the time. And so if there's a question, you know who to go to for the answer. If there's, you're starting to hear some rumblings and things like that on a story, you kind of can piece things together and you have good relationships. When you are a national person and you're not at a facility every single day, because there's so many media people, like even last week I was in Pittsburgh and I've talked to Mike Tomlin one on one probably once a year for the last 5 years. But every time is almost like the first time.
Like,
And then he was like, "Oh, wait, we talked about, and then he's like, the Athletic, man, like there was somebody else from the Athletic here a couple weeks ago." And sure enough, like I stopped through there, Mike Silver stopped through there, Connor stopped through there, Jeff Howe stopped through there. Everybody's doing their training camp tours and we're hitting it at different times. But it's hard for people who don't see you every day to just be able to keep up with that. So it takes more time to build those relationships when you're seeing somebody once or twice a year. Once you get to the playoffs, some of those teams, like as far as like the Eagles, I've been there a lot during the regular season, the playoffs. I have good recognition with some of those people, but it just takes more time. And as far as players go, they are surrounded by 15, 20 cameras and phones and mics sticking in their faces. And so you try to get those guys off to the side to introduce yourself, but it takes several times of going for that to and then it's just hard to feel as comfortable dropping in there when you have questions you want to ask, but the beat writers are trying to get their wood chopped, and so you kind of try to stay back a little bit, but pick your spots. So it's a little tricky, but it's still great. I love the freshness of it. There are times when you're on a beat that it can get a little monotonous. You're out there, every single day the same. Like when I was on the Washington beat, it got to be Groundhog Day, and
that's
every week they were losing, and they were losing the same way, and it was the same problems over and over. And you're like, how do I tell a new story about this? Well, for me now, when I'm national, I'm helicoptering in. I've got 3 or 4 story ideas in my back pocket that I'm trying to work on, and it's just fresher, less monotonous, and keeps it fun and light that way.
you mentioned being on the beat and then doing the national. I'm curious, is there when you're a beat reporter and you see the big national guys come in, I'm thinking about like the Schefters of the world were in this week. Do the do the local guys not say out loud, but are they a little frustrated when the big national guys come in and grab all the attention and maybe some of the time they were looking for?
I think I remember the end of the thing. I think it was 2013 season. Um, every single Sunday driving to FedEx Field, we knew at some point Schefter was going to drop a bomb. Schefter had written Mike Shanahan's book for him.
Right.
And so they had a relationship, and you knew, as nice as Mike Shanahan was to you, you knew you were not going to get in better than Schefter. And so there were things you were trying to find out, trying to piece together, and it was really difficult. Whereas if you're your co-biographer, you're going to have, a little more privilege. You've known this guy for, 20 something years. And so that was frustrating. And I know sometimes it can be challenging for local people, whereas they would like, sometimes some teams don't give the beat people a lot of one-on-one time with the head coach because there's 15 guys, and so you're trying to piece it together. Whereas a national person might come in from out of town and get 5 minutes, 10 minutes with the coach. Just kind of depends. But I think everybody kind of understands at the same time, like, hey, this guy's here for one day. Yes, he's going to get some more FaceTime with this guy, but I'm also going to get him. I'm here tomorrow and the day after and the day after, and you just kind of figure, hey, everybody's doing the best they can. You can't hold it against him for trying to do his job. And as long as the person isn't coming in sensationalizing and throwing sticks of dynamite on everything, then everybody gets along pretty well and understands that everybody's just trying to do their best.
If for young folks that are looking to get into the industry, and we talk about this being a relationship driven industry, what is easiest, probably in the right word, but what is the best way to start making some of those connections when you're just one person looking around at a sea of people already doing the work?
Yeah, I what I always tried to do was relationships are about making a connection, and you want these players, these coaches to realize that you're a person. You're not just some mic in their face. Because if any time, I remember one time I heard um a reporter walked up to a player, and this is when I was very early on the Washington beat, and he said something, and the player turned and said, "Man, you only talk to me when you need something." um, you know, and that kind of stuck with me. And so I would always have a routine, whereas Wednesday the quarterback talked, Thursday London Fletcher, the defensive captain, talked. So a lot of times I have defensive focus stories. Wednesday was offensive focus stories. And then Friday, I was getting little injury updates and things like that. But I would try to have the hay in the barn. So Friday open locker room, I could walk around and I'm looking for something to connect with. Maybe the guy's got on a new pair of Jordans, and we start talking about those. Or maybe he's playing some music and we're talking about this album. Or maybe he's got a picture of his kids, and they're like at the beach or something like that. And, you're talking about their kids, or they start talking about food, or you try to just find a way to connect and build a relationship so they know, oh, this is a human being. This is a guy who has interest in me and getting to know me and understanding why it's helpful to get to know each other. Because I would say sometimes, hey, I'm watching this stuff and I think I know what I'm looking, but I don't study this stuff for nearly the kind of hours. I don't have the knowledge that you guys do. So, can you explain this to me? And also, when an athlete or a coach realize that you're trying to learn instead of
Yeah.
coming in there thinking you're the expert, then that really helps you. And that helps them understand, oh, okay, this guy isn't just out here to try to, show off all he knows. He is talking to me because of the reason. And I also would explain sometimes, hey, the fans, we're wondering why in the world you gave up that 30-yard touchdown pass and what actually happened. And lots of times I say, hey, well, we weren't playing man to man, we were playing zone. And I was supposed to have this spot right here. And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but this is the defensive coverage and these are the responsibilities. And this happened that kept my teammate from getting over the top and everything. And so you're able to paint a more accurate picture. And when players and coaches understand that you're not trying to crucify them, you're just trying to explain and provide some insight, then your relationships, everything is a lot smoother that way. And so again, if you express your intention and you also show you're a human being and that you are trustworthy, because I've had guys at times test me and be like, hey, don't write this, but, and they
Right.
tell me something, and you know they're looking the next day, and I've had guys say, hey, you didn't do anything with that thing I told you. I'm like, yeah, you told me not to. And so that's how trust is built. And so that's what I would tell every young person. It's a relationship based business. People want to feel comfortable. They want to feel like they can trust you. They want to feel like, and look, it's not being a homer, but you have to explain sometimes. Shanahan, one time very early on the beat, he called everybody. This is his first year. He called all the reporters and he said, you guys keep asking me about injuries. Well, look, like, don't ask me about injuries because I don't want the other team. And I would think you guys would want to help us win. Well, like that's not the job of the reporters to help you win. But Shanahan was a guy that this is back before like the big internet boom. He had somebody in every city that he paid to mail all the newspapers overnight from every city around the NFL, and Shanahan would read that stuff to find any little information about their opponents. And so he would try to keep stuff secret. So you have to explain, hey, look, coach, our job isn't to help you win. Our job, we are explaining to the fans like what's happening, what's going on, why their guys aren't playing. And so everybody has to have an understanding of intentions and what you're trying to do. And so it's always interesting. It's fun. It's challenging at times. It's frustrating at times. But yeah, that's kind of one of the things that you run into, and that young people will understand once they get into the business.
As the way we consume media has changed over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and everybody is doing a podcast or is getting a podcast, will we get to the point where there will be podcasters in the media scrum?
I think it really just depends on the specific team. Because I do know, because I bounce around a lot, there are people who have their independent podcasts who are credentialed by some teams. The NFL is interesting, that they have certain standards, but they let each team kind of set it. Now, I've seen some reporters be denied for credentials by a team on a daily basis and then get credentials to the Super Bowl or the combine. So the NFL even has a different standard. And that can be frustrating for podcasters because they're like, wait a minute, the guy in my backyard said I can't come, but then the league is letting me come, to these
Right.
big events here. And so it can be frustrating, it can be confusing. And I do think that as media changes and things evolve, yes, you will see more podcasters. But again, I was in Pittsburgh just last week, and there were, some podcasters who were out there at practice, I've seen some kind of pass through, and I'm passing through in Washington. And it just kind of depends on how many credential requests the team gets, and what the track record of that podcaster is, because they do look and they'll check things out, and they're like, you know what? These guys are just kind of like some fans. I think they just want to come here to hang out with their idols. But if it's a quality podcast, it's giving insight. Lots of times, you will see them get opportunities. It just kind of depends, like I said, from team to team.
All right, let's get into some football stuff. As the season ramps up here, which division is the best in football this year?
Man, that's a tough question,
I
because
know.
I mean, when you think about the league, I mean, I think the NFC East is going to be tough because you have Philly, but I think Dallas is going to be a lot better if they can stay healthy. Obviously, Washington's got a lot of pressure on them. They're trying to catch Philly, but they can't sneak up on anybody this year, right?
Right. Yes.
And so I think depth wise, they're better. Will they win more games than they did last year? Basically, topping last year is getting to the Super Bowl. That's going to be hard to do. I'm not saying it's impossible, but so that's a really competitive division right there. And I think the Giants are going to be pesky. I don't think that they're going to be great. I don't think they're going to win a ton of games, but I think they are improving, and they're going to make things difficult. And then they're going to run out of gas. So
Right.
I think that, again,
How long does Russell Wilson last?
man, I don't know. I mean, it might be the first quarter of the season. If things start slipping away fast, it's just hard to say what he has as far as gas left in the tank. And Brian Dable and Joe Shane, the coach and GM, under a lot of pressure. They've got to win. So if things start slipping away quickly, will it be Jameis? Will it be Jackson Dart? If Jackson Dart keeps shining, they'll be like, hey, look, we might as well roll with the young guy. So then that way we're building something, and then that helps our job security for next year. So we shall see. But NFC East is going to be tough. The AFC North is another division that, I mean, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Cleveland. I'm not sure about Cleveland. Cincinnati should be, right there, challenging Baltimore. We'll see what happens with their defense. They got a new defensive coordinator. Pittsburgh, look, their defense will be good. Aaron Rodgers is going to be interesting. I don't know that they're going to be a ton better than what they were last year, because their offensive line has got questions outside of DK Metcalf. who is the number 2 receiver? Jonnu Smith, maybe the tight end, but he's been injured, so they haven't had him on the field a whole lot during training camp and the preseason. So there are questions about them, but again, that's another tough division. The AFC
Is
East.
there a point when Tomlin's seat gets hot?
I think that there's a potential that it could get hot this year. If things don't go well, if this Aaron Rodgers experiment doesn't pan out well, then there's a chance that it could heat up this year. Um, I wouldn't be surprised because they are really going all in. They have done things we've not seen the Steelers do as far as go after big name guys and make trades and all kinds of things. Normally they're very conservative. They've been aggressive this year. So if it doesn't work, then yeah, his seat could heat up.
Where does the NFC North fit into the equation?
That's another tough one because I think that Detroit is going to take a little bit of a step backwards, not because of talent wise, but it's really hard to maintain the success that they had when you lose your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator all in the same year. Yes, it's Dan Campbell's show, but Ben Johnson was a mad scientist and he really had a lot to say in the direction of the offense. And so, look, I think more pressure is going to be on Jared Goff this year to keep this thing afloat. And then defensively, they've been grooming their defensive coordinator behind Aaron Glenn. So maybe that won't be as much of a hiccup, but it's still the first time a guy's calling a defense in games in the heat of battle. And so I think they could take a little bit of a step back, and I think that Green Bay could leapfrog them. More continuity, another year for Jordan Love. Injury early kind of derailed him a little bit last year. And so if he can stay healthy, they've got more growth from their wide receivers. They've added some more young guys. They've got Brandon Jacobs. They've got a new defensive coordinator. They look like they could really make some noise. And I think Minnesota, they're really a toss-up because they've got a first-year quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. Yes, last year he was, injured as a rookie, so he's been in the meetings, but he hasn't played. And so it's hard to expect that they could make the type of noise that they did last year. It was surprising with Sam Darnold, but still, at least he was a veteran and understood that offense well. And, Chicago, I think they're going to go through growing pains. But the NFC North, because of Green Bay and Detroit, they're going to be tough.
If there is a best, there must be a worst. What is the worst division in football?
Um, Probably either the AFC South or the NFC South. Um, I think Tampa's going to be tough again. They have a really stable situation there. They do a really good job of drafting and reloading. Jason lightened them, but it was interesting. So we saw them go out and get Tom Brady, and they brought in Gronk, and they brought in Antonio Brown, and they got all these veteran guys. And then they quickly, when that was over, they quickly retooled and shifted their philosophy. They got a veteran, the perfect guy for them, lucked into Baker Mayfield a little bit, but then they really have gone really emphasizing the draft and grooming and developing those guys, and they've been able to do it without taking a step back. So I think they're still going to be tough. Questions about Atlanta? We don't know what Michael Penix Jr. is really going to be. We saw flashes, but as a full-time starter, he could have some struggles. The Saints, who's their quarterback? And they've got older guys on defense, so they're kind of in like a rebuild mode offensively and trying to hold on defensively. So I think that they could really struggle this year. We're going to see hopefully some steps forward out of Bryce Young in Carolina, but they're a toss-up too. So I don't know that anybody's legitimately going to challenge Tampa Bay. And then when I say the AFC South, I mean, there's Houston, and you're hoping that they kind of bounce back. They made a change at offensive coordinator. Injury at wide receiver and awful play at offensive line kind of helped CJ Stroud take a little bit of a slide last year, a little bit of a sophomore slump, but you're hoping they can bounce back. And then I do think that Jacksonville with Liam Cohen is going to be really good for Trevor Lawrence. But I mean, it's going to be growing pains for in Nashville with the Titans. Going to be who knows with the Colts. So that is not like a really like next level. Everybody's kind of still scrapping and trying to establish themselves in that division. So that's why they really aren't that. I wouldn't look at that as like one of the toughest divisions in football either.
Liam Cohen out, gets the Jacksonville job. Bigger bump for Jacksonville or a bigger loss for Tampa Bay?
Um, I think it's a bigger bump for Jacksonville. Yes, he was definitely good for Baker Mayfield. The good thing though is that they have continuity. It was another longtime assistant coach in that system who slides over to the offensive coordinator position, and Baker's comfortable, knows all the guys there. I was there. It looked like and then last week they were practicing against Pittsburgh, and in goal line situations, they were doing well in the red zone still. And so I think Tampa's going to be okay. But I do think it will be a big bump because the interesting thing about Jacksonville was, okay, they had an absolute disaster with Urban Meyer, right? And then they got Doug Peterson, who had won a Super Bowl with the Eagles, a couple years earlier. But after he won that Super Bowl with the Eagles, things kind of fizzled there, right? And so he was out of work. But he came into Jacksonville and he provided stability because, it was anything was better than the Urban Meyer situation. And so he helped them make the playoffs his first year there. And then they really didn't continue to ascend. It felt like he was kind of complacent. Tony Dungy has talked about the challenge as a head coach of maintaining that edge after you've won a Super Bowl and not, being like, okay, hey, this is what we've done. This is what works. Let's keep doing the same thing. You have to constantly work to continue to change, continue to grow, continue to push your guys. And it felt like Doug Peterson had just gotten flat and kind of stale. Well, when you look at Liam Cohen, he's young, he's energetic, he's creative. A lot of his concepts are really designed to help make life easier for the quarterback. And that's something that Trevor Lawrence didn't have the last 2 years with Doug Peterson. So I do think, look, they've got talent on offense. Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter. They got talented running backs. They've worked to build their offensive line. They've got talent on defense as well. And so I think that having this freshness, this newness, this energy from this young coaching staff, because look, they got a first-time head coach, first-time general manager, first-time offensive coordinator, first-time defensive coordinator. That sounds like a big roll of a dice, but they do have a lot of hunger, a lot of energy, and a lot of creativity. So I think it'll be good for Jacksonville.
If you think about where the expectations were for the Commanders last year and how that season ended for them, who is this year's Commanders?
I think Jacksonville has a chance to be that, because they were, they've down into the basement, they were right there among the worst teams. And I think that they can bounce back because of the things we're talking about. I just think they have a really good chance. Now, it's possible that maybe Atlanta, if Michael Penix Jr. winds up being that deal, because look, they've got Bijan Robinson, they've got Drake London, they've added pass rushers through the draft and through free agency. So it's possible that they could kind of take a jump up there and challenge Tampa Bay. But as far as like really going from like basement to contending and making the playoffs, I think Jacksonville has a chance to do that and challenge Houston for that division and at least get a wild card spot.
What do you think inevitably happens with Cliff Kingsbury? Obviously, he's back for another year. He's got a good situation in Washington. There are some guys that say, you know what? I like being the mad scientist. I did the head coaching thing. I didn't like it. It wasn't for me. I think that's a pipe dream for Commanders fans.
Yeah.
What do you think inevitably happens with Cliff, and how picky will he be? Because he can afford to be picky.
No, I think you're exactly right. That's an excellent point, and I think that's what's happened this year. Because look, he did generate some head coaching interest, but he wound up pulling himself out because he's like, look, I've got a fantastic situation here. I've got what everybody believes is generational talent with Jaden Daniels. Why would I leave that to take something that is kind of subpar? I think that he's learned that because, first time head coach, you're like, hey, I got to take this opportunity because I never know what's going to come around again. And he did have a good situation where they had the number one pick, with Kyler Murray and everything. those injuries, but he also was learning a lot. So I think that there is part of him that does want to be a head coach again and take the lessons that he learned from that failure and also the lessons that he has talked about learning from Dan Quinn and applying those and seeing again. But I think he also is going to be like, hey, it's got to be a really good situation. You know, do they have a quarterback already? What else do they have to work with here? Or do they have a lot of draft capital that we can draft and build this thing the right way? He's not going to take a head coaching job like, say, the Saints, like this past year, where they didn't have a great draft pick. They don't have any cap space. They got a lot of aging guys. You know, that's not a really great situation for a first time head coach. Kellen Moore takes that job. Maybe he can, you know, get enough time. That's where you just wonder how much time will an organization give a head coach to turn something around. So I think Cliff Kingsbury obviously has his eyes open, seeing what's out there, but he felt better about staying in Washington than he did, you know, going to, you know, Chicago or something like that. No, they got Ben Johnson, but they had interest. But yeah, I think that he'll be selective. And you know, we'll see what those jobs are that comes out, you know, next year and who's looking for what and what he has to work with.
Let's see. Terry McLaurin, obviously, in the news. And I think it's interesting. It's the first time Washington fans are kind of getting an idea, I think, of who Adam Peters, the negotiator, is. I think we see clips from the draft where he's got that nice smile and the twinkle in his eye. But as I've started to talk to people, Mike, they tell me people didn't realize the shrewd negotiator that Adam Peters is. Coming out of that San Francisco front office, it was not about getting good deals. They wanted to win deals. Just like they want to win on the football field, these guys want to win the negotiations as well. Maybe people didn't realize about Adam Peters. What can you tell us about Adam Peters that the fan base might not know about?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that he's very calculated. He has a plan. He doesn't go into this thing blindly. You know, he's very, you know, he knows, yeah, we could throw a bunch of money at Terry McLaurin, but if it's not perfect, if it's not right for both of us, then you can set your franchise back. He's keeping an eye on a smart GM, you know, because we've seen GMs in the past in this city where they throw the money right here and they're not worried about what's happening down the road. Well, Adam Peters is a guy that's got an eye on the present, but an eye on the future as well. And he's saying, hey, if we hamstring ourselves here, then this costs us here. And he wants Terry and he values him, but he's got to make sure that the number is right for Washington, not just for now, but in a couple years when you're going to have to pay Jaden Daniels or when Terry, you know, is a little bit older and is that number, you know, going to hamstring the team for a guy that's dropping off in production. So he's got all these different scenarios under in his mind that he's trying to play out and make sure that he checks off all these boxes. And you know, he's being patient with this thing, and you know they're you know working through this. We'll see if there's a breakthrough very soon. But yeah, that's what I see from Adam Peters.
In San Francisco, guys like Brandon Ayuk didn't get signed till the end of August. I believe when he was there with Elway and the Broncos, that the new commander, Von Miller, didn't get his deal, I think, until the very end of August. What do you think inevitably happens with Terry this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll get it done. Again, it might continue to drag out. But again, I think that they know, hey, we need him. He's important to us. But also, he's got to understand at the same time, like, okay, I'm probably worth more here than where I am elsewhere. When I've talked to people around the league, everybody says, no, he's a talented wide receiver, yes, you know, but a lot of them don't see him as like a top five receiver. I've had a lot of talent evaluators say he's in that 7 to 12 range. And so Terry's got to understand, and Washington also, everybody's got to compromise a little bit. Terry's got to come off of, you know, whatever his highest, what is the number he wants. Washington has to come off a little bit what their bottom is and kind of meet in the middle. And I think they're going to do that just because they know, look, this is important. This is a special window of opportunity that we have right here. We have to capitalize. And eventually they're going to get it done, I think.
there were like 2 guaranteed quarterback contracts, and I assumed that that would just become a thing. I use that only because it feels like the same thing is happening for the wide receivers. The superstars got some big, big, big money, and I wonder how far that threw off everybody else. For guys like Terry, who, to your point, very good wide receiver, but I mean, think about how many games, and I'm sure AP's thinking this, where Terry doesn't even get the ball in the first half. Like these guys, like the Jamar Chases of the world, you can feed them 20 targets a game and still feel like you didn't get them the ball enough.
Right.
What has these humongous contracts done for the guys that are like 8 to 15?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, okay, so everybody has access to these numbers. Everybody sees these contracts, and you're used to saying, okay, hey, this guy got 15. All right,
Right.
I went 16. Oh, okay. Oh, he got 16. I went 17. And we've seen these quarterback numbers go up, 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 up. And the same thing has happened with the wide receivers, right? But the problem is this: do you have a accurate evaluation of your worth? How good a job has your agent done as far as researching where you figure into all of this? And so, yes, if you are shooting way high and your agent saying, hey, man, I can get you this right here, but people around the league who are signing the checks are like, nah, that's not you, then yeah, that these big deals that you've seen for guys like Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson, and that it does raise the pay for everybody, but not everybody's going to get that. And so you got to be realistic. You have to make sure your agent is honest with you and also has a realistic grasp, well connected around the league, so he can be like, okay, hey, you know, where's my guy's value, and know how to negotiate that way.
I've said this for a couple of weeks now. It feels like maybe Buddy Baker was a little in over his head on this thing. Is that fair? Or I mean, that's what it feels like, that they totally mismanaged this thing.
Excuse me, it does feel that way. Hopefully they've gone back to the table, rehuddled, figured out where he fits. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
And then they can, and figure out the accurate number that suits everybody. But it did seem like maybe they were unrealistic, and the value that they had on Terry didn't match what they had in Washington.
Yes, I agree with that. Can they how productive can they still be without Terry?
They'll be productive, but they're not going to be as potent. If you had Terry and Debo, plus some of the other guys, you really could really cause a lot of trouble for defenses. If it's just Debo, then maybe you'll be around what you were last year. If it's just Terry and they hadn't gotten Debo, you were going to stay and maybe take a little bit of a step backwards because of the familiarity. But then when you have Terry and Debo, and then McCaffrey coming on, then you have an opportunity to really hurt teams in a lot of ways and put pressure on defenses all over the field, create mismatches, and dictate what you want. So that's why it's really important to have Terry, because then everybody knows what Jaden Daniels can do. They're going to really focus on taking away what he likes to do, but it's hard to do that when you have so many guys around him. And so that's why you need all those guys there.
Last one, I'd like to talk just a little bit about Jaden because we hadn't gotten there yet. I'm curious what people you talked to last year when he got drafted compared to what people are saying this time of year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was questions about, okay, hey, who's better, Caleb Williams or him? And ultimately it was like, yeah, it's probably Caleb Williams. But everybody was surprised by the accuracy and just the quick decision making and the poise, especially the poise that Jaden displayed, because that kid, nothing rattled him. We saw him deal with a little bit of injury with the ribs and everything, and that was difficult, but he worked through it, and there was nobody in the league more clutch than Jaden Daniels down the stretch of the season. And so now you're looking at this and you're like, hey, I'm working on, and it'll be coming out Tuesday, tomorrow. Top 25 players, 25 and under. And I asked a lot of talent evaluators, hey, where would you put him? A lot of guys are saying, look, I would put Jaden Daniels at number 2. on the whole list behind Jamar Chase as far as the most dominant player 25 years and under, because they're just that impressed with just his poise, his skill set, his versatility, and the way that he's able to put a team on his back and carry them.
Mike, I appreciate you, buddy. Always great catching up with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right, man.
All right.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you.